At the very deepest parts of the ocean, something unusual begins to happen. Despite decades of exploration, advanced submersibles, and increasingly sophisticated cameras, no fish have ever been observed in the lowest regions of the Mariana Trench. This absence is not due to a lack of life, nor is it the result of incomplete observation. In fact, these depths are far from empty. Life does exist there, in forms that are often difficult to recognize and even more difficult to fully understand. Soft-bodied organisms drift slowly through the darkness. Scavengers move methodically across the seafloor, responding to the faintest traces of food. Microscopic and single-celled life forms thrive in conditions that would seem entirely uninhabitable. And yet, among all of this, fish are missing. This raises a question that is both simple and deeply revealing. If life can persist at such extreme depths, why do fish, as a group, appear to reach a clear limit? The answer does not lie in a single factor such as darkness or cold. Instead, it emerges from a combination of environmental pressures and biological constraints that together define one of the most subtle boundaries in the natural world. To understand where this boundary exists, it is necessary to begin with the environment itself. The Mariana Trench lies in the western Pacific Ocean and represents the deepest known region of Earth's oceans. At its lowest point, known as Challenger Deep, the seafloor reaches a depth of nearly 11 kilometers. At such depths, sunlight has long since disappeared. Temperatures remain consistently close to freezing, and the pressure exerted by the overlying water column exceeds 1,000 times that at the surface. For human beings, these conditions are immediately fatal. However, for life in the ocean, the challenges are more gradual, but no less profound. As depth increases, the environment becomes progressively more demanding. Food becomes increasingly scarce, temperature remains persistently low, and the chemical balance within organisms is constantly challenged by the surrounding conditions. One of the first limitations encountered is the availability of energy. In the absence of sunlight, the deep ocean cannot rely on photosynthesis. Instead, most life depends on organic material that descends slowly from the surface. This material, often referred to as marine snow, consists of fragments of dead organisms, waste, and microscopic debris. While the term suggests abundance, the reality is quite different. The amount of energy available from this source is extremely limited, and it is distributed thinly across vast areas of the seafloor. As a result, deep-sea organisms have developed strategies that prioritize efficiency over speed. The vampire squid, for example, does not actively hunt in the traditional sense. Instead, it extends long, filament-like structures into the water column, allowing particles to accumulate over time. Once sufficient material has gathered, it is transported towards the mouth. Similarly, many species of sea cucumber move slowly across the seabed, processing sediment in search of organic content. Movement is minimal, and energy expenditure is carefully controlled. Occasionally, however, the deep ocean receives a sudden influx of nutrients. When a large animal, such as a whale, dies and sinks to the seafloor, it creates a temporary but significant source of energy. These events, known as whale falls, attract a wide range of organisms. Initial scavengers consume the soft tissue, and later stages are dominated by more specialized species. Among these are organisms commonly referred to as zombie worms. These creatures lack a conventional digestive system. Instead, they anchor themselves into exposed bone and extend root-like structures that release acids, allowing them to access nutrients within the skeleton. Symbiotic bacteria assist in this process, enabling the worms to utilize resources that would otherwise remain inaccessible. Such adaptations illustrate the extent to which life in the deep ocean is shaped by scarcity. temperature presents a second persistent challenge. The deep ocean remains cold throughout, typically only a few degrees above freezing. In polar regions, temperatures can approach levels at which ice formation becomes a concern for living tissues. Despite this, many organisms have evolved mechanisms that allow them to function effectively in these conditions. In some cases, this has led to a phenomenon known as deep-sea gigantism, where certain species grow significantly larger than their relatives in warmer, shallower waters. This pattern is thought to be linked to metabolic rates, oxygen availability, and the overall energy balance within cold environments. Other organisms rely on biochemical adaptations. Certain fish species produce antifreeze proteins that prevent the formation of ice crystals within their bodies. These proteins bind to small ice structures before they can grow, thereby maintaining cellular integrity. In this way, temperature, while challenging, does not represent an absolute barrier to life. Chemical conditions within the ocean also play a role. In specific environments such as brine pools, salinity levels can become extremely high. These dense pockets of water create conditions that are toxic to many forms of life, disrupting cellular processes and causing rapid dehydration. Nevertheless, some organisms have developed ways to tolerate or even exploit these conditions. The hagfish, for instance, produces large amounts of mucus, forming a protective barrier that may help mitigate exposure to harmful surroundings. While such adaptations are not universal, they demonstrate the flexibility of life when confronted with chemical extremes. Among all of these factors, however, pressure remains the most defining characteristic of the deep ocean. As depth increases, pressure rises steadily, affecting the physical and chemical properties of biological systems. Proteins, which depend on precise three-dimensional structures to function, are particularly sensitive to these changes. In response, deep-sea organisms have evolved structural and biochemical strategies that allow them to maintain stability under high pressure. Many species lack rigid skeletal elements, instead relying on soft, flexible bodies that are less susceptible to compression. Membranes may contain higher levels of certain lipids that preserve fluidity, even under extreme conditions. In the case of fish, an additional adaptation becomes important. Fish that inhabit deep environments produce increasing amounts of a molecule known as trimethylamine N-oxide, called TMAO. This compound plays a crucial role in stabilizing proteins, preventing them from losing their functional shape under pressure. As depth increases, so too does the concentration of TMAO within the body. This relationship allows fish to survive at depths that would otherwise be inaccessible. However, it also introduces a constraint. TMAO is closely linked to the regulations of internal chemistry, particularly in relation to salinity. As its concentration rises, it alters the internal balance of fluids within the organism. At moderate depths, this balance can be maintained. Marine fish are already adapted to managing differences between their internal environment and the surrounding seawater. However, as TMAO levels continue to increase, the system becomes progressively more difficult to regulate. Eventually, a point is reached at which the chemical adjustments required to withstand pressure begin to interfere with the organism's ability to maintain overall stability. This creates a limit. Observations of deep-sea fish suggest that this limit occurs at depths of approximately 8,000 meters. The deepest known fish, including species of Hadal snailfish, have been recorded at these depths. Below this level, fish are no longer present. Importantly, this does not indicate an absence of life. On the contrary, the trench continues to support a range of organisms, including amphipods, microorganisms, and various invertebrates. Life persists, but in forms that do not rely on the same biological structures as fish. This distinction highlights a fundamental principle of evolution. Different forms of life are shaped not only by what is possible, but by what is sustainable within a given environment. While fish have evolved remarkable adaptations that allow them to penetrate deep into the ocean, their physiology imposes limits that cannot be overcome without fundamentally altering what it means to be a fish. In contrast, organisms without rigid skeletal systems, or those with simpler cellular structures, are able to continue beyond this boundary. The Mariana Trench therefore represents not an endpoint for life, but a transition. It marks a depth at which one form of biological organization gives way to another. Beyond this point, life becomes increasingly unfamiliar, shaped by conditions that favor flexibility, chemical resilience, and minimal structural complexity. In this sense, the deepest parts of the ocean are not defined by absence, but by transformation. They reveal the extent to which life can adapt, while also illustrating that every adaptation carries its own limitations. The disappearance of fish at extreme depths is not the result of a single overwhelming force, but rather the cumulative effect of many interacting factors brought into balance at a specific point. It is here, within this balance, that the boundary is formed, a boundary not of space, but of biology. And just beyond it, life continues in ways that are no less complex, but fundamentally different from what exists above.